People who are self-made are more fearless. I'm not afraid to lose it all. I'm not afraid to die. I love life and I want to procure more. It's a gift to be able to mythically set out to sea and not be concerned when or if ever you return to port.
From me to you, I'd be pretty cautious on sending out invites to you because I want to be respectful of your time. I want to be intentional with my invite.
People who are game, for intentionality and depth are really game for intentionality and depth almost all the time. I'm someone who I'll be responsive. If it is something that I feel like there's an opportunity for growth and adventure, yeah, I'm in. And it doesn't have to be some major thing, but I know that I wanted to meet Ken Wilber for so long, and it was 5 years or something before I got to meet him. And then we became so close and I understood he is super intentional. So if I'm going to go there, I really want to just be as present as possible. So when I went out the first time to meet him and I sit there with Ken Wilber and we have eye contact for like a couple hours or more straight, not a break in eye contact, and 3-4 people are sitting in on the meeting just taking notes, quiet, who are doing that when people of note were coming to visit Ken over the years, like as a sort of journal of like what's to be learned, what are we tracking, what are we aware of in between Ken and this guest, in this case Sebastian Siegel.
I find myself enjoying nice things. I know that to be happy in life, you don't need anything. Am I a hypocrite?
The material world, if we look at like the unmanifest realm of God, sort of consciousness, right? And then the invisible forces that drive us, wow, we have to keep identifying these. We have to keep looking inward. Yeah, I think it's okay. I think the thing is not to get lost in it. We can be genuinely excited about it from a really healthy space. Then it makes it more playful. It makes it like less like an external desire, like I gotta have that thing. More like, well, this is cool, but I've lost a lot of incredible things, and I don't care, like I don't care. I'm not trying to throw away things. I'm not wasteful, but whatever. Hello, my dear man.
Hello, Sebastian. How's everything on your end? How have you been?
Excellent. It's nice to see you.
So to give the audience a bit of context, Sebastian has came on my show 2 times. This is our 3rd time coming together, and each time I've loved our chat and our conversation. Sebastian's an amazing author, director, writer. He does so many different things, and we're going to dig into that on today's episode. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on once again, Sebastian.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Perfect. I guess, yeah, Sebastian, over the last 6 months, what's something new that you've been digging into, learning, figuring out? What has been an addition to your sort of, I guess, routine or knowledge base?
Yeah. So because I work in consciousness, it's really in 3 fundamental ways. Yeah. One is in psychology. So couples and high functioning individuals here at my office in Los Angeles, and sometimes on Zoom. That's the one leg of that. And then the other is in filmmaking and storytelling, writing and producing, directing epic sort of true stories about transcendence. And so it's the same thing. They seem very similar, but they're both really storytelling to say, what are these invisible energies within us? And what are we paying attention to? And what are we harnessing? And where are we letting it guide us, take us? Yeah. Are we shying away from life? Are we diving into life? Are we intimidated and daunted? Or are we allowing ourselves to be excited and opened? Yeah. And so storytelling in psychology and in movies. And then the third part of that is really through immersive experiences. And that's really as a speaker or in terms of lucid dream experiences. So lucid dream experiences I usually do once a month in Los Angeles. And it's just really a means for me to keep myself sharp as a storyteller, involving binaural sound waves and guided story, very specific story in the ocean or the forest or the sky, the stars, and then using basic breath, fundamental breath work. And in that story, I'm using a number of different sort of archetypes in the most Jungian sense and Joseph Campbell-esque sense to unlock things so that an individual can become more lucid, more aware. So even during sleep, not awake, but aware, this is happening. And then allow up these energies, whatever they are, salty or sweet, light or dark, and bring them up and befriend those energies. So in some ways, right, I work in consciousness in 3 realms. One is as a storyteller in experiences, right, or as a speaker. I spoke last week at the Institute for Neurosurgery Innovation in Los Angeles. I was one of the keynotes at the end of that all-day symposium and gala. and I'm doing a keynote next in 2 weeks from now in Zihuatanejo at a lovely event called Unbound, and I'll do a sort of 45-minute, 1 hour keynote, also on consciousness and surrender and becoming. And so, from my storytelling as a filmmaker, as a writer, producer, and director, as in with Grace and Grit, what initially connects you and me, the Ken Wilber story, that's also a story about transcendence, about surrender, about resurrection. And then in psychology, my forte is really in these sort of Jungian energies, but ultimately in integral theory, yeah, i.e. Ken Wilber. So looking at what are these things that excite us and looking at them from a range of different perspectives, whether it's individual, self, other, right, egoic, evolutionary, collective, what is it that's trying to happen here and what is it that I might be afraid of? And should I back off or should I be excited by this? And what different ways, different perspectives, right, to be able to apprehend these things. So my work in consciousness is very specific, but it falls into those three categories, which I think probably from the outside in sometimes seem very similar, but for me they're the same. Yeah.
Huh. I've been recently listening to this audiobook called Reality Transurfing, and it made me think of you because the author was talking a lot about lucid dreaming, talking about how in your dreams you can basically fly, do whatever you want, and he talked about how it's pretty similar in real life, where in real life you can get anything you want, but there's only a time delay. Whereas in I guess lucid dreaming, it's instant. You want to fly, you can fly instantly. I guess the question is, how do you like? What has been the main benefit of learning and teaching people how to lucid dream, and how could they implement that into their real day-to-day life?
It's interesting. I'm not familiar with the book or that author, and so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but my tendency is to lean in the exact opposite direction of his statement or of that statement, because that sounds like, for instance, as a filmmaker, I want to make a story that draws you in, that draws me in, that draws the audience in, so that they're like, okay, wow. And then all of a sudden there's laughter and there's tears in a way that, oh, wow, that person feels this pain or this challenge. Oh, we as humans feel this pain or this challenge. Oh, wow, I feel this pain or this challenge also. So that it goes from other to us to me, right? And then in the end, then to then push through that, well, this person can overcome, we can overcome, I can overcome, right? We can all kind of overcome. So I think in lucidity, right, very much in lucid dreaming, it's if I make a movie that's escapism, that's okay, right? It's the idea you go to watch a movie and you forget about the challenges of the real world and you're lost in that and then you're back to your real challenges. Well, I don't make movies like that and I don't tell stories like that, whether it's in my office or in lucid experiences or on a show or talking, or making a movie. I like to recruit things to say, look, there's something really profound going on, and we don't have any reason to be afraid if we surrender to this big thing, this big this big happening, this big spirit, this big God. Yeah, if we take ourselves out of the equation for a moment to surrender and then say, okay. So, in relevance to lucid dreaming, I would refrain from describing lucidity and lucid dreaming as escapism. In other words, as, okay, I'm having this great, I'm having this experience in life. Maybe there's a challenge with my lover, with my other, with my emotions, and I go in my dreams and I'm flying or living this life that's so wonderful that I control, right? I mean, I call that out as real, narcissistic's not the right word, but kind of escapist, broadly pop, clickbait kind of description of what's occurring there, right? Whereas the actual functioning, yeah, of lucidity and lucid dreaming is to say, okay, there are things in the most Jungian, right, or even Freudian sense, they're in my shadow that I don't see about myself, about the way I'm operating in the world. And sometimes those things will come up in my dreams. Sometimes they're things that I don't like about the way I'm operating, right, in a day or a week or a year or for a decade or 2 decades. Other times there are things I'm excited about, potentials within myself, but they're too daunting and intimidating. And so my dreams start to communicate those things with me sometimes. And when I say dreams, I don't mean just when I'm asleep, but also my thoughts, right? The way that I'm moving in the world, my intuitions start to communicate those things. These different archetypes start to show up. I recognize these archetypes in other people, and I'm either repelled by or attracted to these components, these aspects, these expressions, these dynamics. And I say, okay, well, let's pay attention to that. What is it that's exciting me about that? In the dream experience, specifically while being asleep, the lucid experience, the idea is to allow up these things and converse with them and see them and say, what is it, how am I identifying with, to be able to interpret the dream, right? For the individual to say, okay, I'm going to befriend all of these energies, right? And if I can befriend these energies, I become more dexterous in life, right? That the idea is, any athlete, right? Or whether it's let's say a baseball player, when he throws the pitch, it's loosen up and then tighten. If it's a volleyball player, it's loosen, surrender, then tighten, right? If it's a football player, it's throw, tighten, right? If it's catch, it's like loose, 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 and then catch and go, right? If it's a tennis player, same thing. In other words, boxer, same thing, loose, 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 and tight, right? So in other words, all these sports, right? All dance, all experience, right? Is about surrender, right? And then apply, and surrender and apply, surrender. Allow. So I would say the same thing with lucidity, that the idea is get in a space where we can totally let go. And I say, okay, I'm totally open, not I want to fly or I want to feel good, but just I allow. I'm on for the ride, and it's bigger than my imagination. It's so much bigger than me. Yeah. That this lucid experience, it's not me that's creating this thing, right? In other words, ideas don't come from us. They come through us. And I think that's the real, narcissistic, misidentification with what the human experience is, right? That consciousness is driving this whole experience, right? And I am a participator in that. And I act as a sieve, perhaps, in some way to those things. So it's saying, I'm going to allow these gates to open up and whatever this thing is to come through me, right? And then I'm going to explore it. So, for example, I might say, okay, let's say you're having a dream and you're with your friend from fifth grade or something like this. And in that dream, you're fighting with your friend. Okay. So then you wake up and you say, okay, it's not about the friend generally. That's an expression of my relationship of that, what that friend represents to me with myself. So if I'm fighting with that friend in my dream, and that friend represents something I don't like about myself, like something that bothers me about myself, even if I like them in real life, but my memory, my impulsive memory is, they upset me. That I'm having an altercation with this aspect of myself recently that I don't like, that might be a healthy thing. So even though the dream might not be pleasant, it might be a sign, perhaps, that really I'm maturing, that I'm coming to terms with something. Or if I dream I'm running up the hill with a friend from fifth grade, but it's a friend I really, 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 really admire, right? That when I think about that friend, intuitively, I think that person's amazing. And in my dream, I'm running up the hill and they're ahead of me. And then I catch up with them and we're engaged a little bit, even telepathically or whatever, we have exchange eye contact or words. So that might imply the interpretation of that dream that this aspect of myself that is heroic, that is running uphill, I'm catching up with. That my self-identity, which is seen through the first person in the dream, or even me from the third person, looking at the first person, and is now coming closer with this aspect of me that is heroic, right? Represented by the friend who I like in fifth grade running up the hill. So when I think of lucid dreaming and lucidity, my mission is to seduce the listener and the audience enough to allow these things up. And the process that I use over the course of about an hour and a half is to elicit a response from using a range of different keys, if you will, archetypally, where I'll talk about animals, let's say a polar bear or a bird or a horse or a buffalo. And I'll talk about different colors, purple, blue, yellow. And I'll talk about flowers. I'll talk about the forest and very specific things about things growing and interacting and the waves and the ocean and the power. And I'll use sounds of thunder, or the wind, or the storm or silence and nature, birds or something in distance. I'm trying to use all these different things for keys that for some people, an elephant, nothing. But for someone else, there's an opening there. And we want to get in there to allow this stuff up. So, in short, I think of lucid dreaming as a key, a way to open up this deeper energy inside of us and get in touch with that, to be able to befriend that. To the most Jungian sense, take whatever's in the shadow and bring it into the light, right? And to put a button on that, why is that important? Because then we become more courageous, we become less intimidated, we become more at ease with even the subtle experiences, right, in our life. And if you think about a great pianist, for example. You hear someone playing the piano and it's the very gentle and then strong and powerful and intense. And it's that juxtaposition, right? Like the best in breath comes after the best out breath, comes after the best in breath. In this relationship, right, between surrender and letting go and casting forth anew, right? And so I think with lucidity and lucid dreaming, it's allowing that awareness of what's happening inside our subconscious up. It's not controlling it. It's very much a Tai Chi exercise. It's not saying I want to fly or free myself or have this like vacation, at the Four Seasons in Hawaii or whatever. It's saying, no, you know what? I'm allowing it up. If it's at the Four Seasons in Hawaii, okay. But if it's with a giant spider riding across the desert and being threatened by a lion or something like this, okay, I'm up for that too. Let's get inside and find out, what does my soul, right, psyche, want to let me know? What am I trying to tell myself through some other voice, through some other character that I have not been listening to, right? And that is depth psychology, right? Psychology meaning the study of the soul, right? And depth psychology is the attention to those deep spaces within. And that's really my work in consciousness. In movies, it's the study of the soul, depth psychology. In psychology, in my practice with individuals or couples or leaders, it's depth psychology, right? And then in lucid experience, certainly it's depth psychology.
Got it. Beautiful. Being into sort of depth psychology and just having all that self awareness, Sebastian, do you go through tough bouts or are you so aware in third person where you just sort of play the movie out and it's sort of you just go with the flow and you don't really go through tough bouts?
What a beautiful question. Not only do I go through the tough bouts, but I would say I'm in it all the time, like all the time. And I think that the transcendent in us, because it becomes less and less afraid, right? Like if you're about to die, right? And you go through that, 1,000 moments at a time, then eventually like it stops being scary and you're saying, okay, I'm dying here. Okay. So now what? Well, instead of just freaking out, I did that, the last time and the last time and the last time. I tried to hold on so tightly. Eventually you say, well, okay, I'm dying. Well, let's get into the thing. Let's feel it. I mean, I just want to feel it this time. And you start to feel it and you feel, well, okay, me is slipping away. My identity is my person here. Okay, all right, cool. Slipping away. And then there's this subtle memory, sense, resonance, echo of me. And then another I starts to take precedent, right? Which lets go of the little me here and now, which is the soul beyond the I. And it thinks in a different way than we're speaking right now. And so language, as much as I'm describing this, it's sort of I'm trying to point at something, a different sense of I, the same I that I was 10 years ago or as a child, right? Same I am that I had the same experience as me 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or as a 5-year-old. We look different, we think different, we feel that we like different things, but it's still a sense of I am. Like if you think back to fifth grade, you think, how did I feel? You say, well, I feel pretty much like me. And that's the same thing you feel if you reach 80 or 90 or 100, the same you. So I'm gonna start to just be in touch with that. It's no longer this dying 90-year-old, 100-year-old me or whatever the age is. And then after that, from the soul to the spirit, that it's okay, now it's totally transcendent, right? That it's saying, okay, that thinking doesn't even exist anymore, but it's just this memory of, there was a this, and there was an expression through this, and 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 this. So where to go with that in terms of what I'm trying, what I'm pointing at there, I suppose, is to say, well, the tough part, I think, is to say, yes, I'm deeply engaged in life and I'm deeply tender. And I think Ken Wilber uses the phrase, which I really like a lot, hurts more, bothers you less, meaning we become more tender, but bothers you less because, okay, I'm surrendering to this bigger thing, this eternal I, this spirit, this God, which is outside of the pain of the little me there now, that's so involved, But the little me here and now wants a lot. Like I'm excited to see you, and I feel you're a tender, compassionate man. And I feel that, and I resonate with that to the degree that I'm tender and compassionate, right? And so I don't want to lose that, I see something and I respond to it. I get teary-eyed often, my practice. Today, a couple was in and it was so intense and I got teary-eyed and it was a lot and in my sense too in my own life. And I don't try to put it away or put it down or put it out or subvert it. But I say, okay, wow, that's a powerful energetic thing that's occurring there. Like where's the gift there, okay, if I'm okay with it, all of a sudden a gift starts to show up in some way. So long story short, yes, tough all the time. And I'm so and I'm grateful for that tough because it's not gonna be tough much longer. Like when are you gonna die, 20 years, 50 years, 80 years, I mean whatever, it doesn't matter. Like when you're done, it's gonna happen just like this. So if you could go through it a million more times, you say, well, all right, this time I really want to enjoy the ride. You know what? This feels a lot like birth. Right?
I love that, Sebastian.
Thank you for that great question because I think a question that also in pop psychology that people online really I think, very dangerously and irresponsibly and self-centeredly and narcissistically describing. And I tend to push back against all that sort of pop psychology of like, oh yeah, I feel great. I do this. I get in the ice and I get in the sauna and I count to 10 and then I forgive everybody and I'm here to have a good time and the universe has got my back and the body knows blah blah. All this nonsense, like all like meh. For me, I think like the worst, the worst, the worst. Now, okay, if it's helping someone get through the day a little bit, fine. But it's not really looking at what's going on. What's going on is mystical. What's going on is spectacular. And it wasn't created by us. It wasn't created by us. We are co-creators in this process. Yeah. And part of that, absolutely part of that story is darkness. Part of that story is salt. Part of that story is pain and confusion. Now, the story of sweetness, the story of honey, the story of light, the story of being found again cannot come without being lost, without salt, without dark, right? Without confusion, right?
I've been really trying, you've mentioned it a few times, sort of really letting go and sort of just listening, going with the flow of life, listening to God, the universe, whatever that your gut feeling. And, yesterday you wake up, I'm a bit groggy, but, I embrace that. I go through the day, I get the ball rolling, I lose a bit of motivation. So I do some push-ups, work out, get back at it, have some lunch, slowly start building that momentum, feel the resistance, take a step back, do some chores, clean up the living room, and then by the end of the day, I have this beautiful, productive day. And then, I shower, I brush my teeth, and I'm getting ready to read at this chair, and my brain is just craving this dopamine. It just wants it's bored. It's wanting me to open up my phone, and all of a sudden I'm scrolling on Instagram for the next 34 minutes. Is that part of the story? Or was social media, the phone, an outside virus, this external thing that is not allowing me to tap into the universe? It's distracting me, or is it a part of the story?
I appreciate what you're saying. And, a life that is fulfilling, right, comes from moments that are fulfilling. And so I think if we think about, wow, setting up this big thing, it's so intimidating. Like, how am I going to be happy and be fulfilled and all that? But I think if we can have, moments where we say, how does that feel? And what you're implying there is that sometimes, right, you're on social media or something and you're looking at something maybe that you really enjoy. Like maybe you come across a clip of us and you say, wow, whoa, whoa, that's cool, right? Whoa, wait, I got to listen to that, right? Or you look at something and it's a beautiful person in an attractive place or whatever, and you say, okay, not a moral issue, nothing wrong with that. But then at some juncture, is that vapid, right? And then at some juncture, does that make me feel like, all right, what am I doing here? Like, will I even remember this in 2 days from now? Yeah. And I think that takes a discipline. It does. Yeah, it does. It takes a discipline to say, and not to be so strict with yourself, with ourselves, to say, okay, if I look over here and I look back at the rainbow, well, that's nice, I look back at the sunrise, the sunset, that's fine. I'm at least aware of what's happening in the world. I'm looking at a little bit of things and saying, okay, well, wow, this is interesting. I understand what's going on here. I understand how this technology works. I'm getting a sense of it. So you have to test it out a little bit. And then at some juncture, right, there's a recognition, an awareness that says, okay, this isn't satisfying anymore. Maybe there's time well spent. Yeah. And we all have that impulse because this is a new product. I mean, we're talking about the iPhone is 12 years old or something like that ish. Most people getting their first one between 12 and 8, 10 years ago. Like that's, something around that, time. Yeah, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years ago, right? Maybe the first ones. So it's a intense and the technology's changing, right? So rapidly. And I think that the intentionality of it, like saying, okay, I'm going to really make a habit to at least follow things that I really like. Yeah, speakers, artists, whatever the thing is that I'm getting, that I'm setting myself up at least to be responsive. When I go to sleep, I leave my phone in the kitchen or in or in the bathroom, and I don't, and I plug it in and then I turn it off so that in my room I only have hard copy books by my bed, right? Because I like to fall asleep with hard copy. And so sometimes I will, when I'm done with something, if I'm working on the computer, right, or on the phone, I'll then retire I'll leave it on the couch, yeah, or in the kitchen usually, and then go to the bedroom and then go, move to a book, that at least I'm saying, okay, look, this is going to end with something that is physical paper, is the last thing I'm going to probably look at. And then an intentionality then in going to sleep.
I love that advice. I'm definitely going to implement that, Sebastian. One thing that you made me sort of realize, you sort of sharing your story of working with couples, like looking back over the last 2-3 years, like I find myself third wheeling a lot of couples for some reason. I just attract a lot of couples into my life. And even though I'm not qualified to be a medium, sort of being single, not having been in a relationship, for some reason I sort of somehow end up being sort of the medium, and being able to unbiasedly see things from both partners' point of views, and somehow just sort of just listen and hear them out, and sort of be, like a conciliaire where that happens. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just that ability to really just try to hear things from both perspectives. But you helped me just have that realization. I guess, yeah. How long have you been working with couples, Sebastian?
Maybe 15 years. And my practice started in Beverly Hills. Yeah. And it was a building that was all people in psychology, all and therapists. And then I was largely influenced by Ken Wilber, yeah, by James Hollis, by Alan Watts, by Joseph Campbell, by Carl Jung, and then all the philosophers, Schopenhauer, Schelling, etc. But I think that it started initially with high functioning men, and then women, and then couples. And so there are a lot of couples, but there are also individuals. And I use practices though beyond, ways to look at things that are, what are these energies? What are these patterns? And I'm looking at these from a range of different perspectives, personal, other, evolutionary, yeah, spirit, God. In other words, what are the calls for becoming? What are the things here that want to shatter something in me that's ready to be shattered, to grow something anew, right? In the same way a snake sheds and grows new skin, in the same way a lobster, is uncomfortable in its shell and gets rid of the shell and grows a new shell, right? That hurts. And so I want to support people through that hurt, to turn that hurt into adventure. And that's really my job, I feel like, to say, look, this is a big adventure. And I think that, it requires compassion and tenderness, right? And perhaps people in your presence, yeah, as you're saying, couples want to share with you because they feel like, wow, he's really at ease, he's really at ease. So he must know something intuitively that it's all going to be okay. And I think people are drawn to that more from a state than they are from an intellect, of saying this is how it should be, or this is where you ought to go, or this is, because the mission, I think, really in psychology and as a therapist is not to lead or teach or guide or advise ever, right? But it's to help uncover, right? Or discover, right? What are these forces? And are these forces, where are they drawing you up to your own becoming? Yeah, regardless of consequence. how are you and the other serving the relationship for the other, for self, and for the us that is bigger than the self and the other. And then also for spirit or for God, like what is calling upon us if we're triggered by something of becoming, and is there a pathway for that becoming in this relationship, perhaps? And then we start to look at things a little differently, saying, "Oh wow, okay, yeah, maybe there is here," you know. Not to say that it's easy, not to say that it's easy, but it can be framed in a way that's exciting. Like for instance, if I say to you, okay, if I say I call you, right, 3 years from now, and I say, Andy, you pick up the phone, you say, Sebastian, it's great to hear from you. And I say, listen, I want to invite you on this thing. Okay. It's going to be like so unpleasant. All right. We might die. Right. The food's going to be awful. Right. It's going to be really cold. Like it's going to be just like grueling, not much sleep. Like it's going to be like pretty brutal. Probably you're going to get injury. You may even lose a limb or at least probably a finger. The odds are good. Like, but I think it's going to be really satisfying. Are you in? You'd be like, oh, this just sounds horrible, right? Now, if I call you in the 3 years, the same thing, I say, Andy, good morning. You say, good morning. I say, you're not going to believe this. And I say, you say, what? And I say, we have this opportunity to climb Everest, and it's going to be so hard, but it's going to be amazing. And I think we can do it. And I've plotted out this challenge. I mean, I know it's going to be cold, and I know we're going to risk our lives, but imagine if we climb Everest, how fulfilled will be at the top. I mean, we're going to become like our greatest selves. Then you're like, oh my God, I don't know. This is intimidating, but I'm in. Okay. So they're the same story. It's the same experience. It's the same thing, but it's an entirely different way of unpacking it. And so this is the mission, I think, as a storyteller in movies, in lucidity, in psychology, right? And all the things I do to say, hey, this thing hurts, but it's amazing. It can be amazing. And so I tend to push back against, all the people online who are saying, oh, yeah, this is how to make it feel good all the time. Like, danger. Like, don't take that drug. Like that one, that's a train off to the smoke chamber.
That makes sense. One thing that I realize as I'm sort of spending time with a lot of these couples, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but I find myself gratefully figuring out what I don't want in a relationship. I don't want to be in a situation where we both have different answers on what we're looking for. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm putting down my partner. I don't want to be in a situation where my partner might not want to go out of her way to help me out with something going on in my business as I'm just observing all these couples. I guess, how has you counseling so many different relationships, Sebastian, how has that guided you or shaped how you or shaped what you look for in relationships?
What a beautiful question. And I think that you brought up things that are really fundamental and very important. And, as simple as those things seem to be, I think that people often don't pay attention to those boundaries or those ideals in a relationship and share them in a way as simply as you just shared them. And I think that there are codes of conduct that create the potential for depth, connection, and reconciliation in the times of challenge. Absolutely, for me, cussing at a partner, non-starter, like just not going to work. Hanging up on a partner, not going to work. Walking on a partner. Now, that being said, we have to be flexible and allow some accidental betrayal. We must. Partner cusses, listen, it's not, you're not, never do this, never ultimatums, but it's saying, listen, this really, it doesn't feel good for you. I know it feels really bad for me, but it's awful for us. And it's certainly not good for God or spirit. Like you're saying, like, I'm not even available. I can't even endure the pain. You know what I mean? Like, come on, like, what is it? Is there any myth in any religion of any person who's heroic that it didn't endure some period of solitude, or guilt or shame, or pain, So, okay, that those myths live in us. And so we must allow those things. Nevertheless, it is nice to say at the top of the thing, look, no matter what happens, let's make an agreement. Like there's a code of conduct of thank you, please. And I really appreciate that. And then it becomes not obligatory, but it becomes fun. It becomes fun. Like, it becomes fun, those simple gracious things like, and they become subtle and they start feeding into the eye contact and the posture and things like that. And it's lovely. And I think those things are very, very important. Yeah. And also emotional acoustics as well, meaning the way that we speak to our partner, because we're all in some way drawn, even from the womb, right? As a child, like you think this happens and this happens way before this happens, right? And as a conscious being in this life, right? We're in the womb already after a few months hearing and recognizing tone so strongly. The mother, the father, even music, right? Language, accent, always is already developing, right? The sense of smell of what is happening, the foods coming in, the biome, the culture, the things around, right? Pretty profound. And so in terms of the sound, sometimes another partner is more sensitive than, one maybe is more sensitive than the other to a specific thing. Like, boy, if someone is excited, they may be drawn to a very aggressive voice, but someone else may be just triggered, but also triggered by that. Yeah. And so really paying attention to what is it I'm saying, but how am I saying what I'm saying? And when is it attractive to my partner? And when is it triggering to my partner? Because if I can note when it's triggering to my partner, wow, that's a really powerful thing, because we can be very upset and say, now listen to me, right? And if the partner's okay with that, that's a lot better than now listen to me, right? And each individual is different, but even being able to recognize that in our partner, if oftentimes our partner may have not even identified it for him or herself.
When you shared that story of like, hey, if I call you in 3 years, invite, hey Andy, do you want to climb Mount Everest? It made me think of how, I have a lot of friends that I grew up with, and often I'm like, hey, like I want them to reach out and invite me to things and hang out, but they just don't. And I don't know, maybe there is a bit of a gap or something there that makes it hard for them to do so. So I try to invite them to things, plus one to things, to sort of make them feel comfortable and let them know like, hey, I'm down to do things that you might be interested in. But as you were telling me that story, Sebastian, I realized that, like from me to you, I'd be pretty cautious on sending out invites to you because I want to be respectful of your time. I want to be intentional with my invite. I want to make sure I'm not wasting your time with something that I want to invite you to, Sebastian. And I was like, maybe all my friends are doing the exact same thing. And as a result, I might only see them on a 25th birthday or like some special occasion. And majority of the time, they're just hanging out with their own friends. And I caught myself maybe doing the exact same thing they're doing to me.
That's a really beautiful statement. I respect it. People are creatures of habit and they're afraid to get out of, where we are afraid to get out of our, what we're used to. And I think that people who are full of adventure, will respond. And I think a good invite that's specific, with enthusiasm in it goes a long way for somebody who's adventurous. And so I think saying something like, listen, hey, I really want to try out this restaurant. Do you want to check it out? This is what they serve. They have this amazing salad, whatever. Or there's this comedy night, and I've never been, but I heard it's really outrageous. I mean, wow, I don't know. It seems really interesting. Let's go. What do you think? And, I think painting a picture of something new, or hey, let's rent a bicycle or get bicycles and go on this path. Sure, a lot of people they're just I don't know, bogged down with life. Okay, well, maybe it's okay if we let those individuals go a little bit, right? And maybe it's like we invite out other people, individuals who are because people who are game, for intentionality and depth are really game for intentionality and depth almost all the time. I'm someone who I'll be responsive, right? If it is something that I feel like there's an opportunity for growth and adventure, yeah, I'm in. And it doesn't have to be some major thing, but I like the intentionality. I know that I wanted to meet, Ken Wilber for so long, and he just doesn't do it, and it was 5 years or something before I got to meet him. And then we became so close, and I understood he is super intentional. Yeah. And so, when I went to go see him, I had read all his books and all that, and he had seen that I had, referenced a lot of his stuff. And so I thought, wow, I'm so grateful for this man's mind. It's impacted me and influenced me on so many levels profoundly. So if I'm going to go there, I really want to just be as present as possible. right? As present as possible. And because I read all the books and others and things and thought through those things and was curious and am curious about this radical, wild experience that we're having here, I think that that's interesting to him, right? I think that he's very, very curious and alive. So when I went out the first time to meet him and when I was invited out, I sit there with Ken Wilber and we have eye contact for like a couple hours or more straight, not a break in eye contact. And three, four people are sitting in on the meeting, just taking notes, quiet, who are doing that when people of note were coming to visit Ken over the years, like as a sort of journal of like what's to be learned, what are we tracking, what are we aware of in between Ken and this guest, in this case, Sebastian Siegel. And then as I got to become close with all those people, I was curious about all those notes, of course. And I think, what I'm pointing at there intuitively is to say, if we surrender it all, right? Like why be born? Like why, right? Like there's really this impulse intuitive that's obviously pre-conscious, pre-verbal, pre-conscious, right? Precognitive. Like there's obviously this desire, if you will, intuition, omega point pull to evolve, this magnetic draw for becoming. Like, why does a flower want to rip its parts apart to grow into all these petals and then, whoa, and then let the bee come in and like seduce it? Why does the flower do this? Wow, whoa, this is cool. This is amazing. And then like after all that, and the bees in there stealing, right? Oh, okay. And then pretty soon it's like, this is what I was made for. I am the proliferator of the world, right? Is the flower's feeling. And then if the flower has some sort of conscious feeling, right? I mean, on some level, right? There is that, there's awareness. And then at that moment, it's like, oh my God, death is coming, fragrant. And then like, oh my God, my petals are coming apart. But this sense that, okay, this is going to happen again and again and again. So where am I going with that? The point is that I think that the invite to be alive, we've already all responded to just by the very nature that we're conscious, that we're having this conversation. And some individuals are more aware of that in this moment. And those are the individuals to draw in and to draw in the way we want to be drawn in ourselves.
As you were sharing that flower metaphor, Sebastian, it made me think on how, like, man, over the last 3, 4 years, I've been teetering on the edge of just going broke, running out of money, not being able to make payroll for that month. And somehow, I keep pulling through. I feel like I'm always have this boulder that is like 90% up the mountain and I'm nearly there. And I think there was a click where I was like, like an older friend, she was like, Andy, don't you realize that you're always going to be 90% there? You're always going to be near the top. And she helped me realize that, I'm already here. I've already made it. And as you mentioned earlier, you're constantly going through bouts all the time. And I guess I'm going to have to really get comfortable with just being on the edge of teetering on breaking even or losing money or going broke. And I guess when you look at people like Elon Musk, he was like on the edge of bankruptcy for 40 years. He was just always just reinvesting. And I guess if that's the case, I might as well enjoy it.
Bravo. That's right. Absolutely. And I think that, money is so abstract because, just by having, just by living in a place that like that you're in, like, and just by being able to have like, the basics, it's already like top of the top of the top, and yes, Elon's a great example. I think he and I met right after he, had done PayPal and was, into going into X, but before anyone knew who he was. And the phone call that he describes with NASA when they supported him, yeah, with this huge credit line. I mean, he was like, I think he cussed on the phone. He was like, "Oh my God!" And he was so excited, right? And then he just let it out, because he couldn't believe it because he put everything on the line. And I think the flowers demanded the same thing with that opening. And so, yeah, of course, it's demanded of us, and we don't have to do it. We can just back away. But then, like, we want to always have one foot in sort of understanding and knowing like what's going on. But then we also want the other foot in total surprise, and sometimes both feet are going to be more in the realm of, okay, I can figure out tomorrow. And the other times the both feet are going to be like, I have no idea what's happening right now. And that's the right balance, right? That's the right balance, right? Like, that's I think the right space, that we want to live in between certainty and uncertainty. Yeah, that our becoming, is somewhere in there. And I think, I could draw an analogy here with an individual and a vocation and an individual and a relationship to say, well, the touch points keep us so that we have a communication. Like we understand the same language, we have maybe some interest in the same smell, let's say, or draw or what have you. But the difference is between two people, that's where the growth is, right? Like that's where the growth is. The difference is like, whoa, where we grow through each other and we get to know ourselves through the other. Like you get to know yourself through me, you get to know me, but you also get to know yourself through me and vice versa, right? And that's why the grace is so important. That if we're graceful, we allow more knowing. It's less intimidating for me to get to know myself through you if you're so forgiving. If you're forgiving, I can say anything, and so I can think anything, and then I can say anything, and then I can act on so many things, or I can at least get them out there and share them with you, right? That's that grace. And so I think with a vocation, it's the same way that we want to touch things that we feel in some way that we understand and we know that we have a natural inclination, for and to, and yet we also say, okay, well, there's a challenge there. How do I make this into a business? Right. And I have to then now do things in a certain way and branch out in a certain way I've got to get excited about those things. And I think like for you, right, as an interviewer, as a podcaster, like, well, man, I mean, you're prolific. You've interviewed so many incredible people, and your sensibility and your grace and your presence, you get such great interviews because you're so present and you listen so deeply and you're so aware. So, right, but it triggers you because you're so good at it, probably, but yet it's hard to make that into a business, right? It's got to be so challenging. And so I think those things, then same thing with movies, right? Movies are so hard to make, to have them be profitable. So it requires a certain, well, how do I go about this in a way to reach an audience, or have, commercial sponsors in a way that is a win, and that's an outrageous puzzle. It's an outrageous puzzle. But when we can figure it out, because there's always ways to figure it out, we get more creative. In other words, I think money is abstract, but it draws us to be more resourceful and more creative. And when we think of it like that, then it's exciting. When we do it just for the money, then it's not exciting. Everything becomes mundane, right? And vapid. But when we think of it as a puzzle for our own becoming, then it can be exciting.
Wow. Sebastian, as you've gone through life and sort of figured out the fundamentals of life, figured out how you manage your energy, figure out the hero's journey, figure out going with the flow with the universe, figure out the people that you want to spend time with, figure out what you love to do you then just do the same thing for the next 10 years? Or are you still growing every day and you, from when you did figure it out to you 5 years later, are completely different?
What a great question. Uh, I have one answer, and the answer is be playful. Now I'm going to circle back and arrive at that answer. There is no figure out, right? And I mean that, and that's why I respect the question so much, because intelligence is always borrowed. It's borrowed from other books and other people, and it's reiterated, reiterated, reiterated. But nothing is more spectacular than presence, right? And wisdom comes from just being so available and present, right? And so we have that, like, we have that. And you see someone who's old and thriving, like 80, 90, 100, someone who's thriving, right? At 90, you see how they're not afraid to talk to anyone. They're just joking, playful. And a lot of times people look and they look at you, it doesn't matter what age you are, they go, it's a crazy person. Fine. It's okay. It's not about them. It's not about them interacting with me. It's about I'm alive and this thing's coming through me. I'm not forcing it on anyone, but I'm playful with the world. so playful, and I feel good when I'm playful. And a lot of people are not, are afraid, you know? But the people who are responsive are so irresponsive and alive, and then we meet each other, you know. So I think that yes, I'm happy to let friends fall off. Absolutely. Absolutely, right? You know, evangelicalism is dangerous to say, ah, I figured this thing out and I want you to do the way I'm doing. I let friends fall off and that's fine, you know. I'm excited to draw people into my life who I can grow from, who I can learn from. You know, I sought out Ken Wilber, so persistently because I know, like, I was just so in awe of him. And most of the authors who I read are dead, right? As we've discussed, yeah, like with Alan Watts, I thought, man, if I was alive when he was alive, I would have done anything to meet him, but I can't. He's dead. Joseph Campbell, I met as a boy when I at a moonrise on the beach in Hawaii, but I didn't know who he was. And then later, though, I went to go meet his wife. You know, and I went to her home in Diamond Head, Hawaii, where she passed away, Jean Erdman, the dancer, as a way to connect with Joseph Campbell, you know, and that was a gift to me, and then also exciting for her to see somebody, you know, tell these stories that this man has impacted my life, you know, who she devoted her life to in so many ways. So I'm always seeking out, you know, the adventure to learn from. You know, not too long ago, just a couple years ago, I made a very good friend recently an older gentleman named Boyd, and he's about 82, and the guy's so alive and successful and outrageous and just like it's amazing. I mean, he's just so playful with the world. I love the way he is. Yeah, and I'm so impressed. And people see him all the time and they think this guy's insane, but he's not. He's so intelligent. Yeah, and so I say, okay, failure leaves clues and success leaves clues. So when I see those things, I'm going to follow those, right? So I look at him and I say, what's he doing? I say, oh, he's super playful. I got to do that. I want to be like him, right? And willing to let go, you know, willing to let go of a lover, of a family member, of a friend. Not push away, block off, cut out. No, but just, okay, it's okay, you know? There's this great Jerry Seinfeld clip from his show where this like gorgeous woman has been seeing him, you know, and then she says, "You got to meet at the cafe." And she says she comes and they sit down, and she's like the most beautiful woman that Jerry's ever been with, and she says, "You know, Jerry, I've just been thinking, and I just don't think it's going to work between us, and it's over, right?" And he goes, "Okay." Sounds good. I've just really been dating you, you know. I've enjoyed it, you know, but everything seems to work out okay for me. She's like, you're not upset? He goes, no, I always seem to land on my own 2 feet. I've been such a great time. Have fun. And he gets up and he leaves, you know. And the humor in that, of course, is that, you know, as humans, we're always like, wait, what a second, what? You're abandoning me? Like you're leaving me? Whereas the other way is to say, maybe who knows what's on the other side of this? Like my imagination is not bigger than the imagination of all existence. So if I keep trying to control it, I'm only going to live to my own best imagination, right? In which case, at some point, it's going to be repetitive after so many lifetimes, right? You know, at some point, I've already intuited all possibilities I can imagine. But if all of a sudden I step into a spot where I know that I don't know, maybe it's the exit of a relationship or a period of solitude, then I start to open my eyes and I look around, I think anything can happen. That's a good one in the morning, you know? Anything can happen today. Anything can happen. And then you're somewhere, you know, and you're the market or whatever, and you're talking to someone and yeah, what's that about, you know? And then they say something and then what's that about? Next thing you know, you're friends. Like that's how it happens.
I find myself over the last 12 to 24 months sort of just attracting more and more like-minded people. As you said, just saying hi to random people, and all of a sudden you can instantly see that there's a similar energy going on, and then you hang out again, you invite them to something, they say yes, you're like, oh, I didn't expect them to say yes, and now you sort of form that friendship. And I guess I'm meeting a lot of people, I guess, outside of my demographic of people that are older, much older, people that are younger, and I guess maybe it's a sign I'm going the right direction. But I don't know if the crave is the right word, but it would be nice to meet someone that is sort of on a similar journey with me, sort of a partner, a soulmate. I guess I'm on the path. I'm getting there, and I guess the universe is pushing me in that direction. So I just sort of have to have faith. Yeah.
I think, it's a great, what you're saying, like, boy, the ability for love and relationship, right, is paradoxically indicated by the ability to be alone. I like company, and I like humans, I like people, like animals. Uh, I like the world, But but the irony, right, or the paradox rather, is that if one can be alone and feel good, that's the ultimate practice, and that's a discipline. It's easy to in this world with this technology to feel lonely because we look and everyone's putting this like story out. And it's like, okay, the world is full of more loneliness now than ever, right? I mean, there's more suicide now than ever. There's more prescription drugs for antidepressants ever. All right. So just no matter what you see today, tomorrow, the next day on your phone, like just know like the world's more lonely than ever. Okay. So, what does that mean, right? If I can make a decision that I'm going to feel good, in other words, I'm going to get in bed alone at night and I'm going to say, you know what? I feel good. Just say it out loud. You know what? I feel good. Literally, just like that. Then you kind of giggle and you think that's insane. And then you think, yeah, you know what? I do feel good. Like that is good. Like, you know what? It's okay. Like if I die in the morning, like this is good. I'm gonna have a good night's sleep. Like it's okay. And then there's this sort of playfulness that starts to happen. And then we wake up and you feel like you said, you're groggy and you're going, you say, well, all right, you know what? Oh, yeah, I feel good. And you say, I sound so silly talking to myself out loud, saying, I feel good. Next thing you know, it's like, I feel good. And you just keep repeating it. Like, okay. What happens then is like we build, an experience in little moments. It's too intimidating to build the whole experience right away. Just little ones. So that ends up with, okay, now if I can feel good for an extended period, 30 minutes, let's say, an hour, right? If I can do it for a minute, I can do it for an hour. Okay, I'm not, but the aim is not to feel good all the time, right? Because I want to cry, I'm going to be hurt, all those things, like all important. Like we have tear ducts, want to use them. But if I can feel good for an hour, now, if that's an hour a day, then I invite someone into that space in an hour, that hour that I feel good, right? Then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I feel good. What do you think about this? And then the natural response is, oh, that's interesting. What's that about? Then there's two people in this space who feel good. That's why that's the sort of prerequisite, for joyous love, right? Which is a paradox because so many people want an other, are thirsty for attention or affection and feel devoid of it because when we're alone, we feel there's angst, there's angst. If we can just release that angst, automatically it starts to show up in subtle ways because we can still be vulnerable and show up in ways where you walk in, whatever it is, the market, whatever the thing is, anywhere, the gas station, whatever the thing is, walking on the street, feeling good, and you're like, it's interesting. You catch eyes with people and you start talking, and then people want to know how does they do it? How does he do it? How does he feel good? Everybody wants to feel good. How does he feel good? Well, he feels good for no reason whatsoever. I want that. Everybody wants in. That's the thing. And so I think that what you're saying is, the availability for an other to come along and participate in the space with you. All you can do is attempt to feel at ease, right, in the moments, and then you're at ease in the moments around others. And people like that. Sometimes and I've tried this historically since I was a kid, a teenism. I go to a party and I don't like going, I never really liked going to a big party. But I would just go and just be alone, right, at the party and wait for someone to walk to me and then engage a conversation and not look anywhere else and just have solid eye contact with that person and really get in there and say, well, like, what's something amazing you read, or like, what's something really painful that happened to you? Or like, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? What's an exciting moment, What's a piece of artwork that you just love that you can't stop thinking about? And then all of a sudden other people start to come around. Like it's unbelievable now in this day and age what undivided attention attracts from others. So the reason I bring that up is that became now for many years a life habit of mine. I go to the gym pretty much every day, or I do something athletic every day, and I'm right here. I don't look around. I'm in here, and so many people come up to me and want that? How is that person so focused? I don't ever take my phone to the gym. I've never taken the phone to the gym ever, even if I go on a bike ride or whatever. The bike, I'll take it, but I won't, I'm not. And I want to be lost in. I want to be lost in the moment. And I think, to put a button on it, everyone wants to be lost. Everyone wants to get lost in the moment. And if they see someone else doing it, people want in. People want in. It's attractive, and I mean it in the most etymological way. It attracts, you know, in a healthy way. Hey, I'm lost over here. I figured out how to get lost in this adventure. And because of it, I'm okay being present. Because presence really is the surrender to not knowing the next moment.
You're right. I think there was this sort of music event I went to with some friends 2 weeks ago, and I sort of went in sort of with I guess, the intention to just have fun, be present, be in the moment, just enjoy the music, not have my eyes wandering around looking to make a friend. And in doing so, I found people, a friend would come, I would introduce myself, I'd get back to just being locked in to the music. I'll turn around, check in, be like, oh, how do you know my other friend? And sort of that on and off sort of balance, I guess, of trying to be locked in, have fun, but at the same time, let's sort of say hi to these people that are sort of in my circle. And I guess it does, it's this weird juxtaposition where when I've gone to parties or events wanting to meet people and make friends and open myself up, the opposite happens. All of a sudden, sort of, you're not sort of attracting people around you. And I guess I'm going to take your advice, Sebastian, and try, see what happens if I just go all in on just being present and saying hi. But I guess maybe it is a dance. It's that balance, because when people do come your way, you got to say hi to them, talk to them, get to know them, but do it in a way where if the conversation doesn't go anywhere, where you're happy to just continue enjoying the party, enjoying the music. I guess it's a dance, right?
There are dancing Shivas, so to speak, everywhere, and I use that term as an awakener, right? Somebody who wants to tell you something that's valuable. And it doesn't, it's neither male nor female. It's neither tall nor short, nor young, nor old, nor rich, nor poor. I went to some musical thing the other day, not too long, a couple weeks ago. I went solo and I just was like, I'm curious. It's poetry reading, music thing. And I went in there and it was largely, most people were on some sort of substance, like pretty assertively, so a lot of people were checked out instead of checked in. And I was interesting, and I was just feeling it, and I was happy to be there alone. And then, eventually, somebody was next to me talking, wanted to talk about something, and we talked, and I just got lost in that for a little bit. It wasn't profound, simple, and then this very young person did poetry, and it was not very good. And then this very old guy did poetry, and it was not very good. And then someone else did this thing, and it was interesting and original, and I thought, well, that's cool. And I got 3, 4 minutes of that, and then I was tired and I wanted to go home. And I left, then after that. But I thought, you know what, that's okay. Like there was a nice, simple conversation. I was curious about something. I saw something I hadn't really seen before. And in other words, I get comfortable. I wanted to celebrate. It doesn't have to be like something spectacular. Like I drove here, and I've got 2 legs and I got 2 arms, and like that's cool. Like I can do that. Like lucky me, and then I thought to myself, I can label that however I want. It feels good to say, that was cool. Just feels better. It's just a good choice. There was a lot of choices out there, and it's like, some people it's just never enough, and we're all that person, right? And so there's also, some people it's always enough and it's always amazing. We're also that person, and so I think there's a choice in terms of response to an experience. And where I'm going with that is then that reinforces the response in the present. Like if the simple thing is really wonderful, you know, doesn't require hyperbole, but if it's just, oh, that's great, then the simple thing in the morning is like, oh, that's great.
Sometimes I've often like traveled, with nothing and backpacked and just would just have a t-shirt and some long pants. But at the same time, I find myself enjoying nice things. I want a nice TV, a nice car, a nice watch, and like I know that to be happy in life, you don't need anything. You just have to be present here right now. That's all you need. So I don't like, am I a hypocrite? What's happening there? Am I trying to signal? Is it out of insecurity? Yeah.
It's a great question. I think that the material world, if we look at like the unmanifest realm of God, sort of consciousness, right? And then the invisible forces that drive us, right? That, wow, we have to keep identifying these. We have to keep looking inward. We have to, like you and I, this is our third conversation. We continue the conversation. The conversation never ends. Like we're going deeper and deeper and deeper. But the deeper we go, there's not an end. There's no bottom of the ocean. It goes forever. There's always new depth to touch, right? Like Socrates and then Plato and then Aristotle, Nagarjuna, right? Like it just keeps going. Ken Wilber, like it just Alan Watts, Ken Wilber, it keeps going, right? It keeps pushing, God, the universe, the cosmos. So that's the unmanifest realm of God. So is the manifest realm, the exterior correlate of that, the physical. Wow, a jet flies over and you're like, that's amazing. Like, how heavy is that? And that's flying through the air. That's insane. It's insane. I mean, even if you understand the science, it's still insane. Okay, wow, that's beautiful. Like a car, the first time you drive a car and you're a kid, like you're like, wow, that's amazing. Whoa. You're like, I want a really fast one. You know what I mean? Like, well, this is like it's never enough, they just keep making cars that are faster and more insane, and the cars are going to be planes soon. And yeah, I think it's okay. I think the thing is not to get lost in it, not to replace it for like, well, okay, I want to explore the exterior, right? Whether it's a flower or a tree or physical things that we make, it's pottery, it's a typewriter, it's a beautiful, beautiful silverware, beautiful plates, a beautiful door, beautiful handle, I've remodeled I've lived in really cool places. I've been lucky, I had nothing and I've lived in a lot of cool places and wow, it's a beautiful shower head. I was thinking this morning. I was thinking like it's simple, nothing major, you know what I mean? But I think that that's okay, but just to look at it and say, wow, like we're amazing as humans. Because then I think if it starts to spark us in that way, we can be genuinely excited about it from a really healthy space. And then I think then it makes it more playful. It makes it like less like an external desire, like I gotta have that thing. More like, well, this is cool, but I've lost a lot of incredible things, and I don't care, like I don't care. I mean, I'm not trying to throw away things. I'm not wasteful, but whatever. Whatever.
I love that.
In other words, the celebration of the industry and art and technology, right? The external structures, measurable structures and things, artifacts that we cultivate as societies, different cultures in the world. Yeah, they can be really beautiful. Even, like you hold like my father used to is a was a professor and an author of comparative religions and any religions and he dated a lot of he dated several women after my mother who were very intellectual because he wrote books and they would read his books and he talked and then he dated when he was working he was teaching abroad in Paris and he dated this woman and she was so eccentric and outrageous and like got this spectacular but she didn't like to read books and she says your book is so beautiful and he's so you don't like to read books. And she says, no, but it's just look at it. It's so beautiful. The cover and the pages and the smell. And I thought, wow, she's so alive on one level. Like, good for her. Like, she's not intimidated by the thing. Like there was something really special about that. So I think if we think about things in that way, then it's okay because then we're looking at things and saying, oh, like, well, that's nice. Like, okay. And then it, ties back to the conversation we were having earlier about money as a puzzle. If money is something that I gotta have to feel safe, then like I've missed it, right? But we have that impulse, right? But if we say like, okay, I'm making this movie, I'm doing this show or I'm doing this thing, I've got to figure out a way to bring a revenue stream in here. All right, because I want to do more of this. Wow. That's a powerful statement to say out loud. Because then you say, okay, how can I do this? Like, what can I do here? Are there people who really want exposure, that I can offer exposure to? Are there people who really want a great interview, in the space that I'm in, or want to be in this movie or participate in this thing or this dance or this play or this show or this whatever thing is I'm putting on. Are there sponsors that want to support this, even just for trade? Like I think, money is that, and I think of it as a puzzle, in that way that I get excited about. I don't touch anything just for money, because I think when you've had nothing, people who are self-made are more fearless. Because if you've had nothing, then you're like, well, okay, I know what it's like to have nothing, and I was fine then, so I can risk it all, right? Whereas people who come from wealth are oftentimes very conservative and very risk averse, and oftentimes don't push themselves because they risk ruining the great reputation of the family, the wealth that they have that is put away, the safety net, And boy, that's a real burden. I sit at a table, a lot of wealthy people, and they look at me and I know what they see something that they don't can't quite figure out. And the thing is, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to lose it all. I'm not afraid to die. I love life, and I want to procure more, but I'm not afraid. I don't, it's okay. And I think that's very powerful. It's a gift, really. It's a gift to be able to mythically set out to sea and not be concerned when or if ever you return to port.
Love that. That makes total sense, Sebastian. Sebastian, how do you go about managing your energy with people in your life, whether it's mentors, clients, followers, friends, family, your own energy? How do you divvy that up? Or do you just go with your gut feeling and that ratio just keeps changing throughout the weeks, months, years?
You're such a great interviewer, and I appreciate that. I think that's a powerful question to ask for people because I don't think that people pay attention to it. And I think that we get energy from, ironically, or paradoxically, we don't get energy from like, just like doing nothing, right? We get energy from engagement, right? We get energy to read more if we're reading something. Even if we get tired, we think, I'm so curious now, right? And when we're around people who are really present, yeah, we get more energy, we get excited, and keep spending time with those people. And if it changes, sometimes we're around people that then it starts to feel exhausting. Then okay, we don't have to cut them out, but it's time to like, okay, because the more present you are, the more you require that in others to be interested, which is why Ken Wilber never leaves his place, right? Like to go see Ken Wilber, it's hard feat to achieve. You got to fly there and do the whole thing, But there's a mandate, and the mandate is you've got to be really present to get that invite, right? Like you've got to be really present, as it ought to be. Same with James Hollis, who's a mentor and friend for me, and Ken Wilber, mentor, and then become incredible friend. And Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of The Four Agreements, right? We had his birthday party at my house. So many people in that world that I've been fortunate, to dance with, collaborate with, explore with. But I think that the entry point is ironically fundamental, that it's about presence and the spirit of adventure. To answer the question more specifically, I do watch my energy in terms of what is it that excites me. Like I'm excited to come on your podcast now for our third discussion because you are so present and genuinely, available to what is happening in the world. Yeah, and that's a certain type of courage that, people very often I think that the pain in the world, so much of it comes from an expectation of an exterior and the attachment to that. It's okay, right? We have that, but it doesn't mean we're just driven by that. Whereas, individuals who are marching forth, and saying like, I got to do this. I just got to do this. There's a lot to be said for that. I mean, I found my way in psychology from marching forth fruitlessly for so long. Right. It was like I was lucky in theater and worked a lot as an actor and still have the opportunity to. What a fun job. And I took, so I was reading and writing enormous. I was writing on the Huffington Post, sort of poetic philosophy for years without ever getting paid. And my father's mother, said, why do you do it? It's so much work and you don't get paid anything. I said, I don't know. I said, but it keeps me fresh and it keeps me alive. The irony or the paradox is that later, Ken Wilber, when I got to go, became when he and I became close. Before then, I, made the movie about his life, adapted from his book, Grace and Grit. Probably he cross-referenced before inviting me over there and said, "Who is this guy?" and saw that I had written a lot on the Huffington Post and had referenced him a bunch of times and, was onto something philosophically or transcendentally. So I think things pay off in that way where we can't ever expect them to. We have to plant and we don't know if it's, the winter comes and maybe nothing. And spring comes, we're like, maybe winter killed everything and maybe nothing. And maybe next winter, nothing. And now we've given up. And then all of a sudden, the second spring, acorn, and then like oak, bang. And like, whoa, did I even plant that? Was that someone before me? And I think that's the nature of it, right? Yeah, we've got to feed, Andy, what you're saying, intuitively, we've got to feed what energetically excites us. Like, I don't care about missing any party. I don't care about missing anything. If I'm working at something that is satisfying and fulfilling, that excites me, then I reward myself with something else. Like I'm going to go just take a couple hours and just work out outside in the sun. Not going to keep track of the time. Do whatever, or go to some social thing that I'm curious about, some art thing or something like that.
One more question, Sebastian. When it comes to sort of being present, being tapped in, how do you go about sort of replying to messages? Do you pick up calls? Do you send out messages when you think of them? How do you say yes to things that come inbound? Do you extend invites? All those things. What has allowed you to be the most present, the most tapped in? Because technically you can go through life ignoring everything, not inviting anyone, and just sort of living in isolation. That could work, but I guess it's nice to have company.
I respond to things when I feel like, this is exciting and interesting. When you and I connected, you had interviewed Ken, right? I believe. And I said, wow, and he's really doing something interesting. I'm excited. And I had such a great time, yeah, on your show. And I said, all right, this is great. Like, you've got my attention. I'm in. You and me, we're in. I'm in with Andy Mai for life. In other words, I think we look around and we say, well, who's really doing stuff from a place that's coming from here, right? I mean, I don't know. Ken was washing dishes. Ken Wilber was washing dishes for years. I don't know, a decade. I don't know. From his early 20s to who knows, half a decade or something, just washing dishes, like as a best-selling author, a scholarly author, right? And then all of a sudden now he's like changed philosophy and psychology and religions and spirituality and transcendence like no one ever in the history of the world. Like, because he was just like, I have to do this. Like, I don't have a choice. Like, I'd love to have kids, but I don't have time for that. Like, I've got to do this, specifically. And so I think when people are doing that, I'm excited. Like, what's that about? Even if I don't agree with it, even if I don't understand it, like I'm interested. Like, that's got my attention, right?
I love that, Sebastian. Last two questions we always wrap up these podcasts with. One, any recent discoveries that you've implemented to your day-to-day life, Sebastian, or the last thing you added into your day-to-day life?
Uh, I like, reading from hard copy books is very important to me. In the evening, sometimes during the day when I can, a couple times a week. Very important reading. I feel my best. Being in the sunshine, obviously, I'm always tan. People ask, how are you so tan? It's a very easy answer because I'm outside in the sun. That's it. But the vitamin D, it's fantastic. I eat mostly plant-based. Yeah. Vegetables and vegan shakes and I love it. I drink an enormous amount of water. I like to exercise almost every day. Sometimes it's riding my bicycle. Sometimes it's hardcore workout at Gold's Gym in Venice. Sometimes it's, running up hills or climbing. Doesn't matter what, but something every day. Moving is so important. We discount moving too. Like, I think people nowadays think of it as like an obligation, but it's like if you look at the way our hands are, like these are meant to touch and work and grab and love and caress and build. Like, that's written into our molecular makeup. So if we're not doing that, we're automatically, how can we claim to want to be intellectual or spiritual or soulful or present in any way if we're not using these things? Like, it's obvious, right? Like the way this machine, this way this organism, has been expressed, wow, that fingerprint is spectacular. And even if you cut your finger, right, the fingerprint grows back, which is, I find, a miracle. Right. In other words, like no matter what happens, we're inherently innately, rather, expressed genetically, energetically to move. So that's a very important thing for me every day, no matter what. And if I'm unsure and I hit brick walls and I don't understand and I'm unsure about projects, what projects to abandon because I abandon projects sometimes, and what projects to go deeper on, and the ones that I'm excited by, I think, where is this taking me? Not what is it getting, but where is it taking me? Am I becoming, well, can I really do this justice? Can I make this thing like something that I'll think, yeah, this is cool. Well, I'm going to give myself to that. And if I still can't figure it out, I'm done. I'm going to take a break for the day. I'm going to go ride my bike and go work out, be outside in the sun, smell a lot of flowers. I stop and smell a lot of flowers. I stop to pet dogs. I like to get lost in the moment. I like to be playful, the little bits here and there every day. I see people. I like to be playful. Yeah. So those things. I like to sauna. I like ice and sauna. I do, but I've been doing it a long time, since before it was popular. Before I built a setup in my house, I did like super ice cold shower, garden hose outside in the winter. I like it. It's nice. It's nice because it's uncomfortable.
That's awesome, Sebastian. Thanks for sharing that. And the
Yeah.
last question, aside from work, aside from the three pillars that you sort of work on throughout the week, any personal goals or focus for the next 6 months?
How do you mean then?
Um, any sort of goals that aren't sort of, I guess, work related for the next 6 months? I think the reason why I like asking this question is, throughout the podcast, we get to know what people's business goals are, what they want to do with their careers for the next 6 months. But I'm curious to know what their personal goals are for the next 6 months.
It's hard for me to differentiate my vocation from my persona.
Mm,
I mean, I suppose, yes, if there's a specific answer, I wrote one book called, it's only published in German, right? It's called The Consciousness Revolution, Meditations for New Age. And Geiger Verlag published it in Switzerland, in Zurich. And it's a 200-page book, and I want to edit it down to 100 pages and release it in English language. And it's a hard book. It's like poetry, philosophy, and like stories about transcendence, using all the religions and stories from my own life and histories in psychology and myth. But I want to edit it down to make it a more accessible read. So, and that is vocation related, but it's a challenge for me that I've been procrastinating on, and it's important to me. It's becoming more important to me. What that means is I've also got to be consuming more material, reading more material of authors whom I admire, whose voice resonates with me. So the personal goals are like, reading more. I like playing chess too. That's the question before. I think chess is a great game. Doesn't matter good or bad. I think it's great to play in person, not on the phone or the computer, in person with another person. By the way, great way to meet people. You take a chess game somewhere and you ask people if they want to play. There's always someone in the room who wants to play. Always. At a packed party, someone wants to play chess. At a park, someone wants to play chess. Like always. Like if someone's antisocial or like, socially awkward, like take a chess set. It doesn't matter if you're no good. Someone will teach you how to play. Like it's a great game. I love that game.
I love that, Sebastian. Thank you so much for your time. Sebastian, where can people get more of you?
Thanks. If in California, if in Los Angeles, definitely connect with my assistant, come to my office if someone's interested in depth psychology. My website is deeplyconscious.com. And then on Instagram, I reply to almost everything. Yeah. My name, Sebastian Siegel 1. And then on X, it's also my name, Sebastian Siegel. Uh, yeah. Oh, yes. There's a series that I wrote, produced, and directed since we spoke last called The Eight Questions. And I released it on YouTube. And it's 51 episodes. And it deals with 8 questions. What's the purpose of life? What's love? What's heaven? What's hell? What's intimacy? What's God, religions, and spirituality? And it's 51 episodes. Some of the episodes are like 5 minutes, and some of them are 30 minutes. And they're like little TED Talks. And I introduce each one. I wrote, produced, directed them, shot all the interviews. I shot them a dozen, 15 years ago. Some of the people have passed on. Prolific Academy Award-winning film producer, two incredible fighters, forged MMA, Ken Shamrock, Horian Gracie, surfers like Makua Rothman and Laird Hamilton, someone who's been in prison for 20 years for manslaughter, innocent, Frankie Carrillo, who then got out and became hugely successful, both as a family man and then as somebody in his community, a leader. Brilliant artists and actors and musicians and people in pop culture and psychology like James Hollis and publishing like Marianne Williamson, and Don Miguel Ruiz is in it. And there's so many incredible interviews. The late Richard Chamberlain, brilliant actor who just passed away recently. Beautiful interview with him. A gangster who was in Belmarsh prison for 5 years is in it. That's the most maximum security prison in the civilized world. Um, uh, Leaders in different religions, Dogen Panla Rinpoche from Buddhism, and Michael Berg from Kabbalah, and from Christianity. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous series. So that can be looked up on anywhere. The 8 EIGHT, not the number. The 8 Questions series, and it'll come right up. The 8 Questions series, or on YouTube, The 8 Questions EIGHT.
Perfect. We'll link everything in the description below. Again, thank you so much, Sebastian. I really enjoy this conversation. Like, I still remember our first chat. You were surprised. You were so warm, and even during this conversation, it reminded me of how warm you are. And I remember, like, before jumping on our first call, just going off your Instagram and seeing all the publications, all the men's health. Like, I was like unsure. Like, I was intimidated. And then the moment we connected, I was like, wow, like, you're such a warm, kind person. I could feel it. And and your enthusiasm with your speech, you're so excited about what you talk about. So I love that as well. And I also want to thank you. Like, I got Ken Wilber on the show for the second time because you told me that he was writing a new book and he was doing promotion for it. So thanks to you, I was able to get Ken on for the second time, and that was a beautiful conversation. And it feels like I'm uncovering and learning more and more each time we chat. Like, little things, like I had no idea that you knew how to write in German, and you have a book that's in the German language. That's cool. Gotta learn.
I don't actually know German.
Oh.
I don't. And it was Oscar Wilde, I think, said life is too short to learn German. It's an amazing language, but long story short, we can discuss this next time, but the publisher had an author who was in America who a friend asked me to introduce him to, and we hit it off, and then he went back and told his publisher, you got to meet me. And then they looked at my stuff, and then they contacted me, and then they said, we got to do a book. And then they gave me a contract in advance, and then I wrote the book. But it was only for the German market. And so but I wrote it in English, and we agreed on the translator. And so then I would like to release that in the English market because it's sort of poetic. So it's meant to be written. It's meant to be read in English because it's got a lyrical quality to it.
Wow, that's so cool. And even like just getting to know that, you had a father that was in research and his whole story and dating many other sort of intellectual, like I'm just like learning each, and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. But again, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for doing this for the third time, and I had a blast, Sebastian.
I had a blast too. Thanks so much for having me, Amy.
Guys, if you made it this far, hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. Please let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next week on another episode. Peace.